Okay, this is going to be the second video of nervous system, but this one we're going to do the adaptation of animals for nerve responses, and we're going to do malfunctions of the nervous system. Hopefully, if I get updated in this video. Okay, so adaptation of animals for nerve responses. So we're going to go into because the only animal kingdom has a nervous system, therefore we're going to go into just the phylums of the animal kingdom, no other kingdom. Okay, so coelentry. We use Hydra as an example. They have a nerve net. It makes the whole body respond. If, let's say, their hand touches something, their entire body responds, and they only have one response to every single thing. What is this response? It rolls into a ball. The nerve cells are basically going in all different directions on the nerve net, but the impulses only go in one direction. So some neurons are sending, some are not, all of them are going in different directions, meaning like the cells face different directions, but like the impulses go in one direction. It's very just confusing. So it just like crunches up into a ball. Like there's no like straightforward, this is what's going to happen, this is where the impulse goes. It's just like very confusing. Everything is going in different places. Therefore, it just crunches up into a ball no matter what it is. So how does this help for it? So since a hydra is sessile, meaning it can't move it on its own, when it's in a ball, since it's in the water, a wave could come and it could move it somewhere else. As well, it rolls to throw up, whatever, etc., etc., etc. Okay, annelid and a arthropod have the same nerve adaptation. So we're going to discuss it, and then arthropod has a little bit more, so we'll discuss it also. So annelid, we use an earthworm as an example, and arthropod, we use a grasshopper as an example. So they have a central nervous system. What is that? It has a ganglion, which is their brain, and it's on the anterior in their head, and they have a ventral nerve cord. They also have a peripheral nervous system, which comes off of the central stuff, and it goes to all the sides of the animal. So let's say here's their ganglion, their brain, and then the central nerve, the ventral nerve cord, and then the peripheral nervous system would go off of all of those. It's like, yeah, like nerves and neurons would be coming out of that. Okay, but as well, arthropod also has sensory organs / receptor organs. An example, it has eyes, which it allows it to see. I don't know how to pronounce this, and I don't even know if I wrote it right, so let me know if it's wrong. But tympanae they have. I don't know what it says really. It picks up sounds. It's kind of like their ears. And then they have antennas, which picks up motion and movement. They can feel something moving around them, which humans don't even have. And yeah, so arthropod why did I say that so weird? Arthropod has this stuff, but not an annelid. Annelid, it doesn't have eyes. It doesn't have tympanae or whatever. I don't know how to say it. It doesn't have antennas. It doesn't have any of these stuff. It can't see or anything like that. It doesn't have receptor organs. Okay, chordate. This is a human. A human has 3 different types of neurons, and they all have different jobs. They all have the same parts because neurons all have the same parts, but they're different sizes and shapes, etc. So first we have like a regular one, meaning like it looks pretty regular. It's called a motor. Whoa, I didn't say this word. A motor neuron. And then we have a sensory neuron, and then we have an interneuron. We're going to discuss the sensory neuron first. So it has very long dendrites, and then it has a cyton, and then it has a short axon, and then it has the terminal branches. The job of a sensory neuron is to pick up sensory stimuli. Example, like touch, temperature, taste, smell, sound, light, color. The sensory neurons are on/in the places where we sense all of those things. They are in the sensory organs. Example, like they're in our skin, they're in our eyes, they're in our mouth, they're in our ears, they're in our nose, and they pick up all these things. Sensory neurons carry the information to the central nervous system, which is your spinal cord and your brain, so that we can interpret it. Just a big thing to remember, that ears pick up sound, but they don't hear. They'll pick up the sound, then this neuron will travel, whatever, we'll discuss that, and your brain is the one that hears it, really. Your brain is the one that interprets what this means for you. Same with eyes and sight and nose and smell, etc. Because brain says what the information means, so you could actually feel it. Okay, motor neuron. Motor neuron sends its message to an effector. What's an effector? It's a thing that does the responding / the reacting. So it could either be, the effector is either like a muscle or a gland, whatever. Example, you'll drop the hot pan. The muscle needs to relax. Okay, the motor neuron sends the message from the central nervous system, either your brain or spinal cord, to the effector. And in the effector will be the interneuron, which we're going to discuss now. Oh, I'm just kidding. Sorry, that was wrong. Okay, the motor neuron sends the message from the central nervous system to the effector. Okay, the interneuron is in your central nervous system. The job is to relay, like to pass on, to send the message, the impulse from the sensory neuron to the motor neuron. Altogether, the information goes from the sensory neuron to the interneuron to the motor neuron. I have this picture here, but we're going to go more into it and then I'll explain more. So what makes up your central nervous system? We have the spinal cord and we have the brain. The meninges is a membrane that surrounds the brain and the spinal cord. The bone also protects, and not the bone, but bone also protects and surrounds them. And specifically around the brain, we have a cranium, which is a bone, and it's your skull. The spinal cord's bone is something called vertebrae, and there's a bunch of them. And in between each one is a disc, so that you can bend, because bone can't bend. So if there's disc in between each one, it's good. And the spinal cord goes through the holes of the vertebrae and like through the discs, I guess. Okay. So we're going to talk about the spinal cord. This is a cross section of the spinal cord. Okay. So this is like a cross section of the vertebrae, really. Okay. So the hole in the middle is called the central canal. It's filled with a liquid called cerebral fluid palsy. And it makes everything wet, like your brain and your spinal cord. And yeah, they use this CSF to test if you have any infections in your spinal cord or your brain. The test is called a spinal tap. Okay, the spinal cord is in charge of relay station. It is in between your peripheral nervous system and your brain. So its job is to send information and messages to the brain. The job is reflex. What is reflexes? One is you're inborn. You don't learn reflexes, you're born with it. 2 is it's involuntary. You can't control it. You have no choice in it. It'll just happen. And 3, it happens. It's often a protective value, meaning it saves you. And 4, it involves 3 neurons, the nerve / spinal cord, but it doesn't involve the brain. So here, example, if you have a hot pan of cookies, the stimulus is heat in the hand. Okay, so this is like more going into what we were saying before. In the hand, neuron number 1, the sensory neuron, picks up the info, heat, and that one cell reaches through the spinal cord, gives the information to an interneuron, which is neuron number 2. The interneuron sends the information to a motor neuron, which is right there, kind of, which goes all the way back to the hand, telling it to drop. Let me show you that. So we have this hand, and here we have this. The orange is the sensory neuron. It picks up heat. It will give it to this green, which is the interneuron, and the interneuron will give the information to this pink thing, which is the motor neuron, which the motor neuron will go all the way back to the hand saying drop it. But meanwhile, so that's like complete. That was a full reflex. But meanwhile, each interneuron is telling the next interneuron all the way up to the brain this information. But by the time this information gets to the brain, you already had dropped the pan. But then your brain will be like, ow. So basically, you're going to drop it. You're going to drop the pan before your brain even knows it hurt. That's why reflexes don't involve your brain, because it's just very fast. It takes three neurons, but meanwhile, the interneuron, so it'll go here, watch. This neuron gives it to this neuron. Now, this neuron's going to give it to this neuron. It'll go zoom, but this neuron also goes do, 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 do. So this is going to be really fast. This is going to be really slow. Not really slow, but just much slower. Okay. Yeah, so that's basically it. Okay. Next, this video is already 10 minutes long. The brain. It has different parts. So we're going to go from the bottom of the brain to the top. So the bottom really is the spinal cord, but that's not part of the brain. But then right on top is the medulla and the pons. It controls involuntary actions, things we don't think about: breathing, swallowing, your uterus contracting, blinking. The pons specifically is for respiration, breathing, and stuff like that. Medulla is specifically for vomiting, blinking, stuff more like that. Okay, that on top of the medulla and pons is the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is made up of brain cells, neurons, and it's in charge of homeostasis stuff. That includes that. Example, temperature regulation, which is sweating and shivering, thirst, hunger, sex drive. Hypothalamus is also in control of your pituitary gland, which we talk about with the endocrine system. Pituitary gland produces hormones. So hypothalamus sends message to say when and which type of hormone to make. This is where we see the nervous system cells controlling endocrine organ. Here we see nervous and endocrine system overlapping, which we see that often, but here's a good example. Okay, cerebellum is right on top of that, and the cerebellum involves and controls balance, dancing, walking, all stuff that includes balance. Cerebellum gets the information from your inner ear, and it senses balance or imbalance, unbalance, which is basically like direction, like which way you're facing. How, are you facing upright, etc. If the cerebellum gets tons of different directions, example, you're spinning, it's like, what is going on? It's going to be really confused, and the reaction of that is going to be you being dizzy. Okay, on top of that is the cerebrum. The cerebrum is the largest part of your brain. It takes up 2/3 of your brain. It has two hemispheres. The right hemisphere controls the left side of your body, and the left hemisphere controls the right side of your body. What was I about to say? Oh yeah, shoot, someone's calling. I don't know if it's gonna. I'm not answering. Okay. It's folded, so it increases the surface area. Actually, I have to